Welcome to the Glazing Guru podcast. My guest today is Jeff Warden, Division Manager of Field Testing and Insurance at MIS. Jeff and I discussed how to increase your percentage of passing a field test, how his profession is received by architects and glazing contractors, and thinking intentionally. I had a great time chatting with Jeff, and I hope you enjoy. If you'd like to be a guest on the podcast or know someone that would make a great guest, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. And our sponsor today is myglassclass.com, the leading provider of online glass and glazing training and education. We all know the industry needs training, and myglassclass.com provides the most effective and easy platform to do it. Go to myglassclass.com for over 100 on-demand courses with wide-ranging topics, including curtain wall fabrication and installation and the basics of storefront and entrances. Produced by the National Glass Association, myglassclass.com has everything you need for glazers, fabricators, sales reps, even business owners. It also features Spanish courses and a glazer apprentice curriculum. Get started today with better training at myglassclass.com. Jeff Warden, greatly appreciate your time, man. Thanks for joining me on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's explain, I guess, give a quick background who you are, and then let's get into what you do.
Yeah, sure. Jeff Warden, as you said, I'm a division manager of field testing and insurance for MIS. Been in the construction industry since 2005. Started out as a superintendent and worked my way up. As far as the building envelope industry goes, I started that in 2015 with my previous employer. MIS acquired that company or that consulting firm, and from there it was a window of opportunity, no pun intended.
So puns are good. We like puns right here.
So since then I've had the opportunity to work with great mentors in our company, on our team, who just pushed me to be the best that I can. So that's what brought me here today.
For sure. No, you are definitely one of the reasons why I keep in my posts asking if people want to be on the show, because you reached out to me and wanted to get on here, and I was super happy to have someone in your role here.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad. The more that we can educate the industry, the better.
Absolutely. Before I hit record, we were talking about how knowledge is power, in terms of everyone involved in the building envelope being able to understand the goal as early as possible. So with that being said, you mentioned you're in field testing and insurance. Give us kind of the easy explanation of what that entails.
Yeah. So basically field testing, we test newly installed windows and doors, primarily for new construction projects, including like mixed use apartment type buildings, multifamily, and commercial projects. On the insurance side, so after a hurricane or storm, we perform visual observations for our clients on the windows and doors to identify if there's any wind damage or not. We look for things like ingested gas leaks, frame rotation, all types of wind damage. And, then we select windows and doors to test for our client. In a nutshell, windows shouldn't leak after a storm. So that's what our insurance division does.
Okay. So field testing, we're talking, I guess, give us a broader range of what field testing are you performing?
Yeah, so we're an ALMA accredited laboratory, perform field testing on windows and doors in accordance with industry standards. That's like your, ALMA 501, 502, 503, the ASTM E1105. Basically set up a calibrated spray rack that delivers water to the exterior of a specimen while creating a pressure differential across the interior. We test windows and doors for air and water leakage.
Okay, perfect. No, that's a great explanation. How would you say your profession is received by general contractors, architects, or glazing contractors?
So I'll start with the architects. Our client base includes, architects, GCs, and specialty trades. Generally it's received well, because at the end of the day, the common goal is to turn over a leak-free building. Testing the windows and doors during installation is great quality assurance for all parties.
Would you say that it's received by across the board? It's received well by all of those.
It is. There are some negatives. For the most part, on the GC aspect, you've always got positive and negatives. We'll have a positive from the architect because it's within, we've tested per their specifications, and then you have, some GCs who may have a negative insight on it because they just want to keep pressing and get their jobs turned over. But for the most part, we have good relationships with GCs. I can see where the GC thinks, it could be a potential negative, especially if there's a failure, and the project schedule is impacted or hindered, due to removing your claddings and your windows. I think it's a positive for the GCs, especially when we show our value by diagnosing a window and working through remediations with a site team. So there's positive and negatives on both sides.
So I definitely agree in the sense that our industry's goal is to provide a building that's watertight, an exterior envelope that's watertight, right?
Right.
Where I suppose kind of the direction of that question is, and we've already alluded to it, everybody understanding what we're doing before it starts. I think the problem a lot of times comes from just things being unclear, whether it was not specified, even if it was specified. What do we do in the case of a failure? Maybe that portion wasn't specified. So we've got a failure. Now what do we do, right? And, the owner a lot of times wants to test as many as possible, right? You're paying for it. It's your building. You want it to be watertight, right?
Correct.
But I guess kind of to your point, the GC needs to maintain schedule, right? And they don't want to incur those costs. So what can our industry do better to get everybody on the same page and avoid that negative and focus more on the positive of providing a watertight building?
To me, it starts with pre-construction, where the documents are reviewed, marked up, sent back to the architect for approval. At the, includes review of the shop drawings and all submittals. Second, I would say mock-ups. Before we recorded, I just said I was on one today. This is where you bring the drawings and details to life, so to speak. All appropriate assemblies are installed with, all parties from the waterproofing contractor to the architect. We recommend testing mock-ups for a few reasons. The first is to check to ensure the assembly is installed correctly. And second, to make sure the assembly performs as designed, which I alluded to earlier.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And again, that's where I usually see the issue, right? It's not specified. The test is not specified. The sequence of events in the case of a failure is not specified. A mock-up is not specified, but now we decide to do a mock-up. And then how are we supposed to test that? How are we supposed to handle a failure? So in complete agreement, it has to start early in pre-construction, right? It has to be ironed out, specific. A lot of times I'll see spec sections that just say, provide test, AMA 501. And it's like, okay, we can do that, but how many frames, right? And then what do we do if it fails? Speaking of failing, field water tests, what is the percentage of field water tests that you see pass?
Oh, on the first time? Let's
Yeah.
see. I would say a good ballpark figure, and I'm going to use that loosely, of field tests that passed the first time, 60 to 70%. We've had several projects where we've had 100%, pass from beginning to end. It's few and far between. You've got the human factor in there, but 60 to 70%.
What is something that installers could do to better that percentage?
That's a great question. For one, the installer should follow the manufacturer's installation guidelines and, not cut corners. Have the, do it right the first time mentality. If there's ever a question about the installation guidelines, the manufacturer or the consultant, on the job site is always willing to assist, regardless of who you're representing. There's also certifications that installers can obtain, like the AMA Installation Master's certificate. Those are some of the key points I can just think of, right now.
The Bible, the Holy Grail that you mentioned there is the installation instructions. And
Yes.
As a manufacturer's rep, I can tell anyone listening to this that's an installer that if you install it to the instructions, and everybody says they do, but they don't. If you install it point by point per the instructions, it is the manufacturer's problem if the frame fails. If you don't, the manufacturer will find the part that you missed, and that's your fault, and you have to redo it. And you mentioned doing it right the first time. I'm a big fan of the quote, if you don't have time to do it right the first time, how are you going to have time to do it the second time?
Perfect.
And when these situations get heated is, we've already said it maybe 5 times now, it's poorly specified. That's when arguments start. The second time arguments start is when they say it's installed per the installation instructions, but it's not. And, you know, it's an awkward situation for the manufacturer because that glazing contractor bought that material from them, right? And they want them to be on their side, but you can't do that if it's incorrect.
Correct.
And you can do everything you can for them except let them get away with something they did wrong. That's not a good long-term solution for the end user, the owner of the building, or the architect, or a company like MIS, right? That's not a situation we want to be in.
No, not at all.
So following installation instructions, we'll say number one. Another question I wanted to ask you, does unitization or pre-glazing of the product seem to lead to a higher success rate?
From my experience, yes. You know, the pre-glazed or unitized systems where you've got critical seals that are applied or installed, you know, they're in a controlled lab environment. That's way better than the field or the stick-built systems. You know, the benefits of having unitized products so that they're assembled in a factory, then shipped. You know, the project can progress much quicker because the installation is faster than stick-built systems. Yes,
Absolutely. And differentiating between the two, a unitized system, which is going to be glazed by the manufacturer, fabricated by the manufacturer, sent to the job site, you've eliminated a lot of those installation instruction issues right there.
Absolutely.
Therefore, that blame can be put back to the manufacturer if something is wrong. And it can happen. I mean, it can happen in transport. Critical seals can be broken in transport. It's not something that's never happened before. And then pre-glazing, you're right. Those critical seals done in a controlled environment. You know, down here where my customers are working, it's 99 degrees outside, Friday afternoon, and you might miss a seal here and there, or there's dust flying around and it might infect that seal. There's a lot of different things that can go wrong. I mean, insects making webs or something in the sill flashing can make you fail a test. A lot of stuff has to be perfect. Taking it out of the field is a good way to get there. We've kind of touched on specifications. I had a question.
Okay.
When you're looking at a project with a client, what drives the decision for which test to specify?
Generally, it's the project specs. You know, they typically drive the decision for which test to implement. You know, during our review process, you know, we make sure that the appropriate testing is specified for the, you know, installed assemblies. Obviously, you don't want you may have a factory specification that was copy and pasted, you know, for like a curtain wall on a, you know, a vinyl window. Well, that's obviously a mistake. So, you know, we'll hopefully catch that during the pre-construction phase or the pre-con process. But, you know, what drives the testing, it's the specifications.
So that's in a case where a specification exists. Let's say a client has brought you on in a way where they're looking for input on what test to specify. Would you always go to a chamber test, or is there an opportunity that you would use a different type of test for a different type of product or building?
Yeah, sure. So like an ALMA 502 is good for, you know, RLC and CW type windows. That's your residential, commercial window applications. That's a 24-minute cyclic test. I would know automatically looking at a window submittal how the appropriate test, you know, what appropriate test we should do. You know, the 503 is more for curtain wall, storefront installations, and you know, fixed assemblies.
Earlier on, you mentioned the insurance aspect of it and looking at frames after a storm. So it's very timely. We've just had a pretty massive storm come through here in Florida. What is the process in determining, okay, the storm overpowered the system? So, because, you know, you have products that are manufacturer tested to 10, 12, 15 pounds per square foot of water, right?
Right.
How do you go about determining, did the system fail, or was the storm stronger than what the system is designed for?
So a couple things. We looked for old water damage. We look for to see if there's any evidence of wind damage, or like I alluded to earlier, the frame rotation. We remove the seals
Can you explain frame rotation?
yeah. So you've got like a vertical to horizontal framing member, and once you have wind damage, it rotates.
Got it.
Well, that and when you put a spray rack system on it, it's not supposed to leak. ALMA 511, that's a field testing standard for after storms. And windows shouldn't leak before a storm, and they shouldn't leak after a storm. So we field test assemblies up to 2/3 of their design pressure under ALMA 511.
Are there cases where you've determined that the storm was stronger than what the system was designed for? Here's just a real life example, and it's kind of from the hip. 6 years ago, we had Hurricane Matthew come up the East Coast.
Right.
And I had several calls about water being inside my storefront. Generally speaking, storefront's going to be tested, lab tested to 10 or 12 PSF, right?
Right.
I had 0 calls about water inside my curtain wall. Curtain walls generally tested to more like a 15 to 20
Right.
PSF. So curtain wall is designed to handle more water. So in that case, this is just, again, I said this is kind of from the hip. It sounded like the storm was strong enough to push more than 10 or 12 pounds of water, but not strong enough to push 15 plus.
That's correct.
So you have found instances where, hey, your storm that came through here is simply just stronger than the system that you had installed.
That's correct.
So is that field testing and inspecting the frame after the hurricane event or storm event?
Correct.
Okay.
It's after the storm event. You speak with the homeowners or the condo owners or the HOA. Did these windows or doors leak before the storm? No. Are they leaking after the storm? Yes. So pull back the carpet and see if there's any old water damage, hat channels rusted. Obviously, if you've got old water damage and you see rusting, and the storm just happened 6 months ago, that didn't happen under this storm. That's been there. That's old water damage. This may have been the critical factor that caused them to fail, but chances are these have been leaking prior to this exact storm. So we have visual indicators that give us tell us what to look for, and most of it's outlined in the the ALMA 511 testing standards. But yes, 15 PSF is a lot. When most your curtain walls are 15 to 20, like you said, and the storefronts are 10 to 12. So
yeah, it seems that there's kind of a breaking point in there for a certain level of storm, I guess. And I'm kind of just going from one event that happened 6 years ago and the phone calls I received for 2 weeks. So that's maybe not the best example, not a large enough sample size, but the people hiring MIS for that insurance portion of it, is that strictly homeowners and building owners, or who all is hiring MIS for that?
Now, we've been hired by insurance companies, public adjusters.
That makes sense. I probably should have thought of insurance companies.
Yeah, so we've worked for all sides.
Okay. And MIS is just the Southeast, or is it larger than that?
No, we are a nationwide company. We've got consultants in every state in the Southeast. We're spread across the Midwest. We stretch up into Washington, Texas, California. We've got a corporate office in Baltimore, and our home office is in Daytona Beach, Florida. So we are spread across.
And do you have a specific territory yourself?
The entire United States.
You're the entire United States.
Yeah. So I've got right hand man, and some good, a lot of good right hand men that assist me. All of our leads are trained. I couldn't do this myself. Absolutely. No, we've got a good team in place, but all the guys that we work with, I think I've got 31 or 32 that report directly to me, and on the field testing and insurance side, but I couldn't ask for a better team.
Now you have a project you need to get out to California for. Is that you going, or do you have local people?
But we've got people in the South, the Texas and Arizona. I don't have anybody in California,
Okay.
but we can get out there in a day.
Okay. So something in California, you're sending someone.
Yeah, we've got projects in California right now.
That's just me being curious about what all you guys are working with. Something I did want to talk to you about, and we alluded to it a bit in terms of defining the specification and following the installation instructions. Those are things that can help us succeed better. But having been part of many field tests myself, things can get heated. Whether someone has made a mistake and they are trying to fight it, or whether someone feels they are being wronged, or again, if the specifications were unclear and people are arguing over that. Sometimes these situations can get pretty heated. How do you handle that?
First get the facts. That's the first thing. If you have a water leak, first thing everyone's doing on site is pointing fingers. So, we must, identify the water leakage point of entry, path of travel, and use the appropriate diagnostics. Once we gather the facts, we can determine the causation for the failure, and if it's an installation failure, assembly failure, a combination of both. Also know your people on site, knowing the personnel roles and the people on site is key, navigating through heated or stressful exchanges. Just know your audience.
I think that's a good point. I would add being honest, and that goes for everybody involved. That goes for the glazing contractor, the brick guy, the drywall guy, the GC, the architect. I mean, I guess you could expand that past our industry. I mean, that's just a good rule of thumb to live by. But
yeah, that's why I said the very first thing, get the facts.
Yes, for sure.
Honest.
And specifically what we're talking about, someone is trying to cover a mistake, and it can get ugly quick if someone lies about that. With these stressful situations, right? And I'm sure you've listened to at least one Glazing Guru podcast, right? I like to ask people what they do outside the industry, and I might not have hit record yet, but you were talking getting out on the boat. So you get out on the boat, you've got kids. Are y'all fishing? Are you just traveling? What are y'all doing?
Oh yeah, no, my boat is in the my boat's in the water right now. if I could go fishing every day, I would. My family and I love being on the boat. Being in Charleston, there's lots of stuff to do and see, but we fish, tube, and just go out there and have fun. I've got two girls and a beautiful wife, and man, nothing more I like better than getting on that water. Boating is it's our happy place, is what we say.
That's how you disconnect from arguing over field tests.
Yeah, until I see somebody that I know out there on the water, they want to start talking about work, and like, hey man, it's Saturday or Sunday. We're not going to talk about it.
Exactly. And emailing back and forth with you. You mentioned something that I liked, and I'm going to butcher it, but you can correct me. It was being intentional with your thoughts. I walk me through that and correct me how I butchered it. Intentional.
So, okay. I see what you're saying. So, throughout the work week, I feel it's best to be intentional about setting, aside time to think. I've only recently started this over the last 2 years, but it works. We have a great leadership coach with Greg Cagle. He drives intentional thinking home. So if that was your question.
No, that's right. And I'd love to hear you expand on it a little bit more, because I like that. And it's not exactly, but it's something that I know that I've said to my son, and probably a lot of our little league team, is be intentional with your actions. You're doing something for a reason. Don't get in the batter's box and just swing the bat. Like, we're up there to hit the ball. Let's be intentional. Right. And I liked how you put it. being intentional with your thoughts, and outside of the workplace, and being able to separate that and being intentional about separating it. Did I understand that? Is that
Yeah,
close to what you meant?
it is. I was thinking of it more of a work related, be intentional about what you have coming up. Intentional thinking, is critical, whether that's personal or in the business. You've got to have time to think to be successful. And I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, I like that a lot, because if we can relate it to field testing, right? I mean, if you're just being reactionary and you're just doing stuff, and if you want to compare that to how I just said the little leaguer walking up in the box and just making the ugliest swing you've ever seen, the guy going out and installing the storefront, you want to half-ass it and it gets chamber tested later, that's going to be found. But if you are intentional about what you're doing there, or as I was kind of trying to expand that, you're done installing, you were intentional about installing, you want to be intentional about how you spend your time away from work to be able to separate yourself. I like that. Be intentional. I'm going to use that more.
Yeah, it's worked for me tremendously.
I definitely had used it, like I said, but corresponding with you, I kind of liked how you had expanded it for me to thinking. Jeff, greatly appreciate your time, man. Is there anything else you want to throw in there? Are you guys looking for more business? How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, our website, consultmis.com. J Warden at consultmis.com. We're Moisture Intrusion Solutions. You can Google us. That's us. Glad to help.
I'll be sure to link that everywhere I post this stuff too. So if you guys want to get a hold of them, if you want to hire them, come out for field testing, insurance claims, or if you just want to argue about it, what was specified and what wasn't specified, that might be fun to do too.
Yeah, it's consultmis.com. John, I appreciate your time today. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, man. Have a great one.
All right, you too.